3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to the Danz Newz podcast. We have great topics we're gonna talk about. Oh yeah. Oh, welcome. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Oh, you welcome. You welcome.
Welcome to the pod.
Podcast. The Danz Newz podcast. Consider yourself welcomed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special Danz Newz podcast. I don't know why I'm doing that voice. Welcome to a very special Danz Newz podcast. We're doing another movie Q&A, the second edition since we've started up the podcast. So thank you for those who submitted their questions. I put it out to all the patrons here on the Patreon. And this is going to be kind of going out generally. Anybody can listen to this one, but it's not the patron-only podcast. It's just an open one for everyone. Yay! Everybody loves everybody. This is not a real song. Ding! That's actually a real song because I just made it, and it's available on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere books are sold. Anyway, everybody, welcome to the podcast. We got some questions lined up here. It's not going to be incredibly long. Didn't get crazy amount of questions. There was a potential of, I think we have 30-something plus patrons here on the Patreon, and we only got some from 3 patrons. So next time when I put out that call, be sure to, put your questions in so that way you can get your questions answered. Unless you didn't have any questions. You're not a very inquisitive person, which, hey, I respect that. Although, you want to go around in life with a little bit of inquisition in you. Not the Spanish Inquisition. Those are some dark times. But you know what I mean? Being inquisitive isn't a bad thing. You got to have a little bit of curiosity in your life. Not too much, though. I heard it killed a little feline friend of ours. Okay, first up, CL Entertainment says, my only question is, what is your opinion on Scott Pilgrim? And have you seen the movie while, dun dun dun, under the influence? Well, CL Entertainment, thank you for your question. I quite like Scott Pilgrim. I've seen that movie I saw it in theaters with my little sister way back in the day when it came out. And man, from that opening credit sequence, just when the music starts, just like the bass starts going on that guitar, I was in, man. I was tapping my toes during that credit sequence, and I just loved the vibe of that movie. I would say it probably, pacing-wise, starts to lose a little bit of steam towards the end. Every single time I watch that movie, it gets kind of a little, I think it's a little too long, maybe, is its issue. But I love the pacing. The pacing kind of keeps you invested, though, just because it's like snap, 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 next scene, next scene, next scene, next joke, next thing. And the layers of it is just firing on all the cylinders pretty well, because it's really clever dialogue, and it's just so snappy, and it doesn't overplay it. It's like any other Edgar Wright movie, except for maybe Baby Driver. I think that one was a little less snappy, although there was some, snappiness with the way the motion every now and again would sync with the camera and the music and all that stuff like that. That was kind of the whole gimmick of that. Well, not the whole gimmick of that movie, but a portion of that movie is kind of set to the music, and I feel like it didn't go all the way with it. I think it should have gone more to where a lot more of the sequences were set to the music, but every now and again it would sync up to the music, and it was pretty cool. But I feel like it wasn't probably as snappy dialogue-wise as Edgar Wright's other movies. But Scott Pilgrim, yeah, I have. I've shared that movie with a couple people in my life, and one of the ones way back when I was in Colorado, probably a few years ago, Liz and I watched it, and I darn sure toked up during that. It wasn't anything crazy. It was just, I watched a lot of movies when I was high back in Colorado days because weed was legal in that state for recreational use. I was of age. I do not condone use. If you are not, I would say 25. It's legal 21 there, but your cerebral cortex and your frontal lobe and all that. What is it? Your frontal lobe doesn't finish developing until you're 25. I was right at that cusp. I was like 25, 26 when I started smoking. So I would definitely say, now I'm in North Carolina. It's not legal here, so I'm not doing that. But No more token up during the movies, but I tend to remember a lot more now. I'm not smoking during the movie. But no, I mean, it wasn't any different. I don't think, I mean, I was a pretty regular user in Colorado, so I would say it didn't really alter things too much. It just kind of got me into a nice, calm, chill spot, maybe a little bit more focused on the movie, actually, in certain things. I tend to focus on themes and especially on reviews, like, of a movie. Like, I try to focus on, like, character stuff, story stuff, try to notice things I haven't noticed before, as you do generally revisiting a movie. And something as layered as Scott Pilgrim is, you tend to see more going on behind the scenes or, you know, right in front of you sometimes with a lot of the stuff. I just remember the first time I watched it, I didn't know what the hell to expect. I was never a fan of the comic book or anything. I had never read the comic book. And I have tried since then, and it was a lot different from the movie. So I just kind of was like, I don't know if I'm very much interested in this. I know I was talking to Eads about it a little bit recently because he had never seen the movie, which I was very surprised because he didn't know it was an Edgar Wright movie, and he's a big Edgar Wright fan. And he was saying he had tried the comic book a while back and it just wasn't his thing. I was like, it's pretty different from the comic book. I mean, as much as it is taking inspiration from the comic book, and there is even like just straight up art from the comic book or made for the movie in the movie. Like you have that one sequence where she explains her history with, I think it's the Patel guy, the first boyfriend that Scott fights. She tells the story while they're fighting, isn't it? Right before they fight or whatever, about their relationship, and it's the art is done in the way of the comic book. So yeah, that's pretty neat when you can do something like that. But yeah, I couldn't get into the comic. Maybe I should try again later in life. Sometimes I tend to find some things that I don't necessarily find I like when I'm younger. I can kind of have more of an appreciation for it when I'm older. It really kind of depends, though. And that's not like Scott Pilgrim, something that older people could appreciate more. I think that's definitely something for the young people out there. Hello, fellow school children. Isn't that what Steve Buscemi says in that one commercial? But yeah, so definitely, I wouldn't say being under the influence was any different with the viewing. I just found it to be, maybe I was nodding off a little bit towards the end, just because it does. That was my last viewing actually as well, was probably a couple years ago, and I had smoked during it, and I didn't find it to be, if anything, I kind of noticed the pacing issues towards the end, and how it kind of slows down a little bit when it was just moving at such a speed early on. It's probably after the fight with Mr. Captain America himself, Chris Evans, that it tends to kind of slow down a little bit. That's actually hilarious. I love Chris Evans is so quotable in that movie. I wish I could remember more quotes than that, because there's one point when he's in the middle of a fight and he just checks his phone because he got a text and he's like, "That's actually hilarious." That and the the last thing you're gonna hear is me hanging up, or no, I can't remember the line.
Now you listen close and you listen hard, bucko. The next click you hear is me hanging up. The one after that is me pulling the trigger.
Just Plain Dro, hey Dro, how you doing? Asks, is there a film idea that you came up with years ago that you still want to make? Oh my God, all of them. Every single movie I want to make is an idea I came up with years ago. I mean, the apartment horror movie that I talked about, that I've had developing pretty much since the hub ended, like right around when the hub ended, and I was just kind of pouring all of my ideas and stuff into my idea notebook. I've still been working on it. I've still been trying to. The thing is, like, I have a basic idea. I really should just like write more into it. I've tackled it every now and again, and I really can't get out of the opening scene. Most of the things I can't get out of the opening scene. Back in the day, I had written a screenplay, again, this is a movie I want to make as well, the Desperate Measures screenplay, based on my brother's short film, Victor James. Back in like 2010, I started writing the screenplay, my version of Victor James, called Desperate Measures, and got something like 30, 40 pages in. And it was just kind of flowing out of me. I was really like on a good pace with that script. And that's kind of back when it wasn't really until like 2013, 2014 to where, like, when I was working on Trapville, that was probably the last kind of big scripted project I worked on, where I was like regularly writing and So it was like 2010 to 2014. I was just writing a bunch of stuff. I was really focusing on the writing. And then after a while, I kind of got more interested in the directing of it and less of the writing on it. And I really wish those other guys, which not that they didn't bring up ideas and contribute a lot. Like we improvised a lot of stuff as time went on, but nobody else ever really wrote anything. I kind of wanted to turn the writing over at the very least. Like Jordan and I wrote stuff together every now and again. We did that Little Guys series for High Res Studios, the Smite people, kind of like a mini series that took place within Smite. We had actually pitched them like a Machinima series that never came around, kind of based on that same idea of the minions being like the main characters. And we had some ideas for that, but that nothing ever really came from that. But, I always wanted to kind of like bring more people into the writing process as opposed to just me, so I could focus on directing something, because I really like directing. I like shooting things. I like doing that stuff. And sometimes I don't feel like I have the best ideas sometimes. And that's one of the things that like writing now is I really want to come up with like good, cool scenes. And sometimes I just like, I halt myself because I'm too busy being preoccupied with making it as snappy or as like engaging as possible. And so I'll just kind of like sit there and be like, what should happen here? I have a good idea for the overall arcing thing, but I don't sometimes know how to really kind of tackle individual scenes and make them interesting. I obviously have an idea of where I want it to go, but I don't know how to fill in that space with something, that I find, because I'm so critical of myself, and generally when I'm reading things or even movies, like, I can get pretty critical on a scene where it's like, well, that scene went nowhere, like that, what was the point of that? So I try to not do that in my own things that I write. I try to kind of make it have some sort of reason. Maybe it doesn't have to be like apparent, like on the nose, but I do like it to be interesting and engaging at the very least. It doesn't need to be spelling something out, but I still want it to be entertaining. So that's kind of where I'm at with some of my stuff. I'm still working on Desperate Measures, still working on the apartment horror movie, which tentative title is The Evil Above, which it's the working title. I don't think it'll ultimately be called that. But that's the working title. I haven't thought of anything better, and I'm not really that far along in the writing process to be able to say like, maybe there was a line in the movie or something like that I'd be like, ooh, that was good. I still have other ones that are even in like even more infantile states. What? Infant? They're in infant states? What's the way you would say that? In their infancy. There we go. I still have some ideas that are a bit more in their infancy. Something like there's one movie that I really want to do that is about a kind of not wannabe filmmaker, a kid who loves movies. It's kind of like me. It's partially based on my own stuff, kind of my own life, a little bit, not really. It kind of breaks off into fiction, but the idea of this kid who just really loves movies and wants to be a filmmaker so bad that him and his friends kind of try to wrangle people together in their own small town to make a movie, so the entire town is involved. That's kind of an idea that I've had for a little bit that I haven't really tried to really crack too much. That's kind of in, like I say, in its infancy. And there's, I don't know, I have a million ideas. There's a bunch of things. There's comics I want to do. There's cartoons I'd love to do. They're all in my idea book. I just haven't really been able to have the time / capital or kind of creative energy to actually get them a lot of them off the ground. One day, I swear, all of these things will have come out and I'll be like, man, I can't believe it took so long for all these things to come around. But it's good that I have ideas. It's better to like have ideas than not have ideas. But after a certain point, you got to get it going. My brother and I are still, every now and again having meetings and stuff, talking about the Kamasato series. Him and I his wife and him are doing the real work. I am not that involved with it, but in the development outside of like him bouncing off ideas off of us and kind of letting us read the scripts and kind of go over stuff and creatively talking back and forth about some things. But we shot kind of like a couple shots for a teaser recently, worked with a couple of the actors. It was super basic stuff, nothing crazy. I don't even know if you watched the teaser that will be coming out here in the next couple weeks, if you would even know what we shot. compared, because there's some footage in there that he had for the original teaser that was, I think, for the most part, stock footage. There's some stuff in there that isn't stock footage, but for the most part, it's stock footage, and just kind of to sell the idea of it all. And I think based off that, you'd probably be able to tell what we shot. But either way, it's kind of cool to be able to focus on this project coming up, Kamisado, the event series that my brother and I will be shooting next year at the beginning, and then putting out kind of probably a summertime or so. It'll be coming around on my channel, so y'all will be seeing that. So the idea of coming up and actually finally doing something, hopefully that kind of gets me going, like, yeah, I really want to kind of get moving on my other stuff that I've had ideas for a long time. But a lot of that takes a lot of coordination, and really kind of like, how do we go forward in doing this once I actually do finally have a script? Hopefully coming up soon, I'll have a little bit of extra time to focus on that stuff. We'll see how that goes. So yeah, plenty of ideas, Dro. It's just, it's kind of the time to actually get it done and everything else. There's so many things I want to do. There's so many games coming out. There's so many movies I want to see. There's so many movies I haven't seen. There's so many shows everybody's telling me to watch. I want to start reading books again. That'd be nice. Like, there's a million things that are just it's time. It's time. Who has the time for any of these things? So it's going to have to come down to attention span and what I actually can get focused and get done here in the coming future. So hopefully, I really would love, hopefully before the end of the year, that I like actually have, before 2020, I'm turning 30 at the end of this month. It's my 30th birthday on the September 28th. I'm really hoping that I can get a good chunk of a script done. At the very least, I've still been etching away. Like, Desperate Measures is probably the one I've invested the most actually writing time in recently. Been able to kind of etch away at the opening scene a little bit more and get that kind of like actually moving. A lot of the time it's like I just really hold myself up, and I should probably just write the scene and then reiterate and refine and all that stuff. That's what I did way back in the day, was like I would write out a scene and then I would just go over that scene over and over again. It's probably not the most productive way of writing, but it was yielding some pretty cool results. I was liking what I was writing back in the day. Maybe at some point I'll share some of that stuff, but I don't know if I'm ever going to actually like reintegrate any of those ideas into things for that story. And I wouldn't want to spoil anything or kind of give too much away, but I definitely want to do more writing too, just writing in general. I've considered kind of doing kind of lengthy posts here on the Patreon as sort of like a blog or something like that. Use it in that way and kind of share some of my thoughts about stuff, because I love writing. I do like writing a lot, and sometimes I like just writing about other things other than just fiction or whatever would be kind of cool, because I used to do some blog stuff back in the day. All right, now I'm just rambling about me, which I guess this is partially about. It's the Danz Newz movie Q&A. What are my thoughts on things with movies? Speaking of my thoughts on things, Guttural Nutria asks, hey Guttural, what is your favorite Cornetto trilogy movie and overall thoughts on Edgar Wright as a director? Well, hey, we already kind of tackled that a little bit with the Scott Pilgrim question from CL Entertainment. My favorite Cornetto trilogy movie, I think it has to be Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz is just, look, I love Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is a nearly perfect movie, I would say. But Hot Fuzz is just so quotable, so funny, so clever. Like, not to say that Shaun of the Dead isn't. Let's not say that me saying one thing about one movie isn't knocking another movie, because all three of them. When we talk about the Cornetto trilogy, we're talking about Shaun of the Dead, we're talking about Hot Fuzz, and we're talking about The World's End. All three written by Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And other characters who are smattered throughout all three of the movies. But for the most part, those are the two primary actors that we follow in each one of these movies. And Hot Fuzz, I would definitely have to say, like, I love a good, like, I grew up loving the Scream movies. I saw Scream 2 when I was like 8 years old. I had a sleepover at my friend's house when I was 8 years old, and my friend's mom was watching Scream 2 on pay-per-view. When I was over there, and I watched scenes, like not the entire movie, but I had seen the opening scene. I vividly remember the whole Jada Pinkett, Omar Epps part, in that movie. And some other scenes later in the movie, like when Courtney Cox is running around the sound studio portion, like hiding from Ghostface. Like that movie really stuck with me from an early age. It's kind of like Blade, where it's like Blade is kind of like my foundation of superhero movies. Scream is my foundation of horror movies. So Hot Fuzz is a little bit that kind of slasher. It has that slasher kind of vibe to it. It has that murder mystery whodunit sort of deal. I love that stuff. I won't be spoiling that. Like if you've never seen Hot Fuzz, I definitely recommend it highly that you see that. Watch all three of these movies: Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, The World's End. They're all different flavors. They're all really great. But when it comes to that trilogy, I just love what Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright were able to do within the specific genres they were tackling. Because the first one, you obviously have the zombie movie. Second one, you have the slasher movie. The World's End is kind of like a buddy. What would you call that? I guess a sci-fi movie. Yeah, it's kind of his take on a sci-fi sort of deal. And all three of them have just the sharpest wit and the best performances. And he really had free reign to have access to, especially after Shaun of the Dead, like the casts in these movies. I mean, a lot of the actors from like something like Shaun of the Dead, a lot of like you had Martin Freeman in there, like in a cameo portion, and you have Bill Nighy, and like you have pretty big actors, but in some actors that kind of got huge as time went on. So you have these great casts, and Hot Fuzz is kind of like, if you're into 80s, 90s action movies, there are so many cameos. Like, it is ridiculous how many cameos there are, or not even cameos, like the actors in roles. You have Timothy Dalton. You have the bad guy who played Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark as the priest guy. You have, the bad guy from one of the Lethal Weapon movies as one of the characters in town. Like, there's so many random actors and actresses in those movies that are just so good. Academy Award winning. Oh crap, what's the lady's name? She was in Hot Fuzz. She played one of the cops. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she won an Academy Award. Was it last year or the year before? Was it for that? Which movie was that for? I can't even remember now. I think it was that movie with Emma Watson. Or not Emma Watson, Emma Stone, that I didn't see. That's probably why I don't remember its name. Anyway, I'm an old man who can't remember movie titles now at this point. But, you know, it's just a great group of talent that he's able to pick out of these movies. In the World's End, you have Rosamund Pike from Gone Girl and other movies, and Die Another Day. Oh, I never even put together that Rosamund Pike and Pierce Brosnan. Brain vomit going on like crazy right now. But Pierce Brosnan and Rosamund Pike were both in Die Another Day. She was a Bond girl in that movie, and they were both in The World's End. I never put that together. She was infinitely better in The World's End than she was in Die Another Day, because my goodness, Die Another Day kind of put her on my list of actors who I'm not super crazy about, and I think Gone Girl kind of brought her out a little bit for me, and The World's End definitely a lot. I like her a lot in that movie. So just because I haven't really been super crazy about her performances in other, she was in Doom, opposite Carl Urban. She played Carl Urban's sister. So she's always just been kind of one of those bland actors like that I'm not super crazy about. And in more recent years, I've seen a little bit more range from her, which is nice to see from actors that kind of like seem relatively one note. Because I've always been a fan of Carl Urban. I think he's been great. But even in Doom, he was kind of like, he's a little one note in that. In a movie where you can make The Rock not charismatic, he's so serious in that movie. Everybody's so serious in that movie until maybe towards the end. It gets a little goofy. But even then, he's not like I guess he's having fun with it, but it's just, yeah, Doom. But I forgive Doug Jones for being in Doom because I love Doug Jones and he can do no wrong. So, yeah, the Cornetto trilogy, I would have to say my favorite is Hot Fuzz. Overall thoughts on Edgar Wright as a director, like I was saying before, I mean, we pretty much in this podcast, we've discussed his entire filmography as far as a director goes. Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, The World's End, Scott Pilgrim, and Baby Driver. I feel like Baby Driver was like not if it were from any other director, I would have been like, man, that's like this director's on the up and up. But after doing those 4 or 5 movies previously, I was expecting more from it. And especially when it was being kind of touted as this movie that's set to the music and like it's doing something that no other movie has done. And maybe this is reviews that came out beforehand that kind of overhyped the idea of it being so like everybody was like, man, it's just like the movie score is just like the heartbeat of the movie and the movies do it like completely sync to it and whatever. I was expecting more of that. It was really just the opening of that movie and then a couple of the action sequences that were really kind of like set to that idea. Because he did that music video. I can't remember what the music video was for, but he had directed the music video way back in the day. That was the idea with Noel from, I can't remember his last name. Noel. See, this is me trying to remember names and movie titles today. That's not really coming up Millhouse. Noel from The Mighty Boosh. He's also one of the hosts on The Great British Bake Off, which I love on Netflix. He was one of the replacements as time came on because there was two other hosts initially. But either way, Noel, like he's the star of that music video, and it's like all set. He's like dancing in the car set to this song. And it's just a really delightful music video. And I get not being able to do an entire movie like that. But there's times in the movie where it's like it feels like it's trying to. And you're like, oh, that was almost kind of synced to it. I get, okay. Like car chases. And, like it's a decent enough movie. But it's a little too on the nose, I feel, in its content. And the dialogue isn't necessarily that great at points. Like it has some really good performances. I think Jamie Foxx is a standout in that movie. Jamie Foxx and John Hamm I thought were pretty good. Kevin Spacey, his character was a little weird for me. And this is like just before all the stuff from Kevin Spacey came out. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen Baby Driver a few times, and I think I've come to like it more with multiple viewings. I think that's kind of the thing about Edgar Wright's movies. I left the theater with World's End. It was like, about that. I wasn't crazy about that. The more I watch it, the more I really come to appreciate that movie, and I really, really like it. But I think that's kind of that one has a little bit of the Scott Pilgrim thing, where it's like towards the end, it kind of loses a little bit of its steam. And Baby Driver, I'm invested well enough by the end of that movie. Like I think that movie's at a pretty good pace, and it has there are some scenes in there that are doing what they're trying to do, but I think it's a little too. I don't know. I was looking for more when it came to Baby Driver. I was expecting more. When we're talking in the vein of Edgar Wright, I feel like nobody remembers that he was set to direct Ant-Man and then got fired from Marvel, and then Peyton Reed ended up coming in and replacing him. Like at this point, they made 2 Ant-Man movies, and I feel like the discussion around that topic has kind of just like completely gone away. But he was set to direct Ant-Man. He had done a lot of the work. He had written the script. They took his script and kind of rewrote it, but for the most part, it was, as far as I know, pretty similar to what he did. I couldn't point out what he did and what he didn't in that movie because I never read the original script. But from what I know, they definitely leapt off of his script and we're using that as the blueprint of the movie. But I would have loved to see what he would have done within the Marvel universe. I doubt he'll ever come back because that was a pretty rough breakup at the time, and that was early on. Way back in the day. It's kind of like Patty Jenkins. She was set to direct Thor: The Dark World and then ended up infamously getting taken off the project. I don't know why. It was probably just creative differences or whatever. But and then Alan Taylor ended up coming in, Game of Thrones director, and taking it up. And we all know the rest of that story. But I love Edgar Wright. I think his movie that he shot recently, it's supposed to be like a horror movie. It wrapped very, very recently, last couple of weeks, I believe. Maybe even the last month. I can't remember exactly when, but it's done, and it's around to post-production now. So I'm very curious to see what he'll always be one of those directors that I'm like, oh, an Edgar Wright movie's coming out. I'll definitely check that out. I don't think there'll ever be a point where it's like, I'm not going to go see that. Like he's one of the ones. Like you can't make the Cornetto trilogy and not get a movie ticket from me every single time you put something out, or at the very least, DVD or Blu-ray. Does anybody buy DVDs anymore? Blu-ray, I should say. A 4K Blu-ray. No, I although I do buy 4K Blu-rays every now and again. I think for Endgame, did I buy the 4K Blu-ray? I did. I'm trying to future-proof my collection a little bit because I don't want to have to rebuy everything, and I try to buy them when they're cheap too, like as opposed to when they're like $30. I don't want to pay $30 for a movie. Come on. I get it, though, I guess. I don't know. Either way.
I don't know.
By the way, the rest of the questions are all from Guttural Nutria, who asked a few questions. So thanks, Guttural, for all the questions. Your next question is, during the summer, you've watched all the Bond films, so they've been on your mind a lot recently. What's your experience with the franchise? And, of course, who's your definitive Bond? Mine's Timothy Dalton, partly by how he utterly exceeded my expectations, but also how suave and cool he is as Bond. Well, thanks, Guttural, for that question. The Bond films. In 2012... I started a series and only put out one episode because that's how I roll. I started a series. It was going to be called Bond Month. And it was called Bond Month. And I ended up recording reviews for the first 3 movies. But I started this right before we were set to go out of town for something. And I only ever posted the first episode for Dr. No. Which is the first of the Sean Connery Bond movies and the Eon Productions Bond movies. Casino Royale was like the original Bond movie like the first one to come out. And that one had, a bunch of actors in it, including Peter Sellers and, I can't remember the other guy's name, but there were other notable actors in there. But that was just like a rights thing. Like they had the rights to Casino Royale, so they made that, and it wasn't like a, not that it wasn't sanctioned, but it was just a rights thing. They had that, and that isn't technically considered part of the Bond franchise. It's kind of like Never Say Never Again, which is just a remake of Diamonds Are Forever. Is that the name of that? Yeah, Diamonds Are Forever. That one actually has Sean Connery in it, but that was like a Warner Brothers produced Bond movie. And they just had the rights to Diamonds Are Forever, and they were making the Roger Moore Bond movies at that point. And Sean Connery came back as Bond. Kim Basinger is the Bond girl in that movie, and it's not technically part of the Eon like movies. It's really weird. Although I think they technically own it now. Although they don't include it in anything, like when they do releases of the collection. I have the Bond 20th anniversary. What is it? The 50th anniversary Bond Blu-ray set. And that includes up to, it didn't come with Skyfall, but it had a slot for Skyfall, which was really cool. And I ended up, and even the Blu-ray, the disc is exactly like all the other discs. Like they planned their home video releases really well. I bought it separately, and then you could put it in the slip. Because that was just before it was set to come out in theaters and stuff. It was like a few months off. So that includes all the movies from Dr. No to Skyfall, it didn't include Skyfall. It included up to Quantum of Solace. And I slipped Skyfall in there. That sounded a little dirty. But either way, the Bond series, I'm a big Bond fan. I grew up loving the Bond movies. At a yard sale, I bought, speaking of owning them all on Blu-ray and like this box set, I bought this VHS set at a yard sale that had up to, it was all the Sean Connery ones. I don't think it had past that. So it was all the Sean Connery Bond movies on VHS. So my familiarity with those, which again, watching them on TV constantly growing up, it was always kind of one anytime it was on and I was flipping through the channels, I would sit down and watch it because I love Bond movies. It's kind of like my obsession when I was younger was like The Simpsons, Law and Order, Batman, Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, and Scream. Like those were my movies and my pop culture things that I was just super into. With other tangential things and all that stuff. But like that was my root. That was my base root of entertainment growing up that I was just really into. Those were my fandoms, as you could say. So Bond was always kind of around. I really liked, when I was younger, I really, really, really liked Roger Moore's. Connery was always my favorite, but I liked Live and Let Die a lot. Live and Let Die was my favorite of the Bond movies for a good long while. I just liked the kind of mysticism aspect. There was like a little bit of voodoo in there. There was a good love story. It had Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman as the Bond girl. It was the right flavor of Bond movie for me when I was young, and I really liked it. It has a couple little cool things in there too that I liked in it. Not that I can remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've watched those. See, I really want to go through. I should totally at some point do a video series on the Bond movies, just going through one by one, just like I was planning on way back when. Again, I recorded 3 of them. Only one made it out. I found not too long ago the footage, but I would not want to put that out nowadays. I would rather just redo them at this point. Do another Bond month or something like that, or just like in general start tackling them one by one, and post the videos when I can. But either way, yeah. So I've seen all the Sean Connery ones. I've never seen the George Lazenby one, the On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I've never seen that one. That was one that's always kind of eluded me. I've only heard good things about. When I was younger, I kind of joked about it, like, I'm never going to watch that one. He was only in one Bond movie. But I've heard subsequently, like, that's probably one of the best Bond movies out there. And I've just never gotten around to it. I own it, clearly, but I've kind of been holding off because I do want to do that thing where I go through each one. Yeah, so I'm really familiar with all the Sean Connery Bonds. I mean, that guy was Bond for me growing up. You know, at first, it was Pierce Brosnan because I like grew up with like GoldenEye. Like that was probably one of the first Bond movies. That was probably the first Bond movie I ever saw when I was young because that was just, I happened to be of that age. Those were the Bond movies coming out. I can never make it through Tomorrow Never Dies. I fall asleep during that movie. The last 2 times I've tried to watch it, I've fallen asleep during it. I don't know what it is about that movie, but I cannot make it through that one. I fall asleep and then I wake up and then it's the Elizabeth's dad from Pirates of the Caribbean. That guy, he's like the governor or whatever of Port Royal. That dude, he's the bad guy in that movie. He's the newspaper mogul or whatever. He's just kind of like yelling and then, I don't know, he blows up or something. I don't know what the fuck happens at the end of that movie. Either way, Pierce Brosnan was like my Bond growing up. So I kind of like just by default, he was my Bond. And then I got those Sean Connery VHSs and I had already seen some of his movies, but like I started appreciating Sean Connery way more. And it was like, okay, this guy was James Bond. And so it wasn't until around Daniel Craig came out that I was like, okay, I think I have a new Bond because Casino Royale is just so amazing. But let me keep going through here. So there was a point I was going through those Sean Connery Bonds that I was like, I really want to kind of go through and watch them one at a time. Went through his, skipped George Lazenby, started watching. For some reason, I don't know why. I think I skipped over Roger Moore. I had seen some of Roger Moore's Bond movies, mainly like Live and Let Die, and no, I had definitely watched some of his later ones too. I remember seeing, like, I've never seen The Man with the Golden Gun. I've never seen Octopussy. I've never seen Moonraker. I haven't seen those ones, but I've seen like all the other ones of his, which that's a lot of his. But did he do 5 or 6? He did a bunch of them. I don't know exactly off the top of my head. But I kind of like, he did that for a good long stretch, and I had seen some of his movies. I haven't seen all of them. I've been neglectful of Roger Moore, but I liked him as Bond, but he was a little too, I don't know, wink at the camera kind of Bond. Not that Sean Connery wasn't to a certain extent, especially towards the end, but I kind of liked Connery's flavor a little bit more. And then I rented the Timothy Dalton Bond movies because I had never seen Timothy Dalton's Bond movies ever up to that point. And my goodness, I was like, holy shit, I really like Timothy Dalton as Bond. I didn't know what to expect. And his was a lot more of a darker Bond. It's kind of like, you know, if Roger Moore was kind of like the George Clooney / Val Kilmer of the Batman movies, Timothy Dalton was the Christian Bale, coming in and doing a more serious take in a darker movie set, because that was the 80s and stuff. Benicio del Toro was like one of the bad guys. Wasn't even one of the bad guys. He was one of the henchmen, like the henchman who didn't really talk much under one of the bad guys. That was really interesting to see. I was like, is that Benicio del Toro? What the fuck? Oh, he's getting thrown into a thing and he's getting mashed up. Okay. All right. He's dead. And that was like one of the first Bond movies where the Bond girl in that movie, or Bond woman, wasn't really, she wasn't like a sex symbol, and she wasn't like just a prize for Bond at the end of the movie. She was actually like toe to toe with him. I want to say it was the lady from Law and Order, one of the ADAs. from way back in the day. I apologize for all my ums, by the way. I'm sure this is a very heavy podcast. I'm pulling back in my brain a bunch and trying to remember a bunch of things, and misremember a bunch of things and not remember a bunch of things because I'm bad at titles sometimes and actors. But that lady from that one was in Law and Order. Because, like I said before, The Simpsons, Law and Order, Batman, that was kind of my childhood. That's, if you combine all those things, you get Dan's interests growing up outside of like Harry Potter and stuff. There was fantasy stuff too, but either way, there's a million things that we all like. And I tend to be one of those people who's like, I'm into a lot of things when it comes to movies and television shows. I can kind of, as long as it's good, I guess as long as it's well done and, has something to latch onto, I can pretty much get into it. Yeah, when it comes to Brosnan, I really only saw. The one I really didn't see was Tomorrow Never Dies. I like all of his other ones. I think Die Another Day of his is the one I've seen the most, but that's because I had it on DVD. It was like my second DVD that I ever owned. It was the first one I ever bought myself because I had The Last Action Hero on DVD. My parents got me that for Easter one of the years. So I had Last Action Hero, and then I bought Die Another Day at the video store. It was like used and everything. Had a really cool case though, and I'm obsessed with like cases and packaging and all that stuff. So plus I just really wanted to see that movie, and so I watched that movie ad nauseum. I watched all the special features on it. I don't know if when I was younger that I thought it was a bad movie, but I think I just looking back on it, that as I've aged, that movie is not aged very well. I would love to actually sit down and watch it again at some point, though, because I can only imagine how bad it is. I'm just thinking back on it. Like, there's this, like, it's kind of like dealing with North Korea, and the bad guy is a guy who's had, like, plastic surgery. He's, like, a North Korean who's had plastic surgery, and he's, like, a British guy now. And it's just there's like this satellite that has like this gigantic microwave thing on it that just shoots a big heat beam down at I think the idea is to melt icebergs to make water or something, I think is what the bad guy's selling it as. But really he just wants to like destroy the demilitarized zone so North Korea can take over South Korea. Yeah, and it takes place in like an ice hotel that he built out in the middle of fucking nowhere. I don't even that movie. I just remember Bond surfing on, I think it's his car door or something. He's surfing with a parachute on this terrible CGI wave. It's like Escape from LA. That one scene where they're surfing through the sewers. What is it? Peter Fonda, may he rest in peace. And Kurt Russell just surfing down the sewer. Oh my goodness. That's the thing about Bond is his movie, like any actor who is in Bond, the movies start off serious, like to a certain degree. I mean, there's a little bit of always kind of that like slightly sci-fi fantasy-ish element to Bond, a little bit. It's more so like it's always kind of grounded in reality to a certain extent, but you have those fantastic gadgets and it gets a little out there sometimes. But like with Sean Connery, gets a little too jokey / out there towards the end. It gets a little outrageous. And then Roger Moore, same thing. Timothy Dalton wasn't around long enough for it to happen. It seems like Bond always gets out there and then they do this hard reset overcorrection of, okay, back to serious. And you have Daniel Craig coming in, and I don't feel like his has gotten too out there. I feel like Spectre was kind of getting close. Spectre was getting close to that edge. They were kind of bringing back a little bit of the camp, but it is still very self-serious, and it's, I don't know, it was a weird blend for me. I haven't really been able to sit down and rewatch that one subsequently. I don't even think I have Spectre on Blu-ray, but that's one I haven't been able to revisit enough. I think I just saw it. I've still only seen it once. I think I watched it once. I watched the beginning of it on Netflix again, but I didn't get through too much of it before I turned it off. So I need to give that one another fair shake. But from what I remember, I was kind of not as into it. It seems like Daniel Craig's is kind of like that, kind of like the Star Trek thing, where it's like every other movie, is great, but every other that by turn of that, every other movie is not that great, because you have Casino Royale, which I like a lot. And that movie's so good. That's the one I've probably watched most recently. When Haley was visiting at the beginning of the year in Colorado, we sat down and watched Casino Royale. That movie definitely holds up. I like that movie a lot. Mads Mikkelsen is so good in that movie, and plus it's just directed really well. Martin Campbell, the director of Goldeneye, actually came back and directed Casino Royale. Like, it's kind of crazy that they went back to a director of one of the Brosnan movies to bring in this new era of Bond. It's kind of crazy, actually, but it still worked very well. The direction was great in that movie. The writing was really good. That movie just has a really good flow to it. And it doesn't really kind of overstay its welcome. It gets a little wonky towards the end. I feel like it does get to a point where like things kind of really ramp up, and then it's like, oh, there's still another like half an hour left in this movie. How like well, I don't want to spoil anything if you've never seen it. Casino Royale is great. And if you're looking to get into Bond, especially current Bond, definitely start off with that one and go through Daniel Craig's movies. But like something like Quantum of Solace, that movie I can sit down and watch. Like it's watchable for sure, and it's like a continuation of Casino Royale and resolution to some of that story, but it's like an epilogue to Casino Royale that's a fair bit longer, and it's a whole movie. But it really is like an epilogue. But it's kind of aimless a little bit. It kind of just unfolds, and it's a little less methodical about everything. Like it was really it seems like it was quickly done. And it really feels like Mark Frost, the director of that, didn't have much handle on it. It just kind of was more interested in being like this like Jason Bourne-ish kind of. It reminds me a lot of the Bourne Supremacy, where it's like the Bourne Supremacy, don't get me wrong, is a good movie, but it is a little aimless to me. It's like that middle movie that it has some amazing action in it, but the story is confusing looking from the outside in. I think multiple viewings you get a better idea of the story and everything, but in general, it's a little aimless, it's a little messy, and it doesn't quite fully land for me. Skyfall is one of the best Bond movies I've ever seen. Like I think that movie's so good. Javier Bardem, so good in it. Has some great action in it. Directed by the director of American Beauty. I'm forgetting his name. Also the director of Spectre as well. What's the guy's name? Sam Mendes. And it was written by John Logan, the writer of Star Trek Nemesis, everybody's favorite Star Trek movie. I don't think Nemesis is as bad as most people think, but I for some reason enjoy that movie more than I should, I guess. I don't know. Nobody likes it, but I do. Tom Hardy came from there. Tom Hardy would be so good in a Bond movie. Not even necessarily as Bond, although he would be a great Bond, but like I think Tom Hardy would be a great Bond villain. Like he'd be really good. I don't know if he'd be interested in being a villain. He'd probably want to just play I don't know. I don't know what Tom Hardy's interested in, but I feel like he would want to play Bond. Either way, Sam Mendes did a fantastic job directing Skyfall. And I feel like it was a mistake to bring him back right after that. I feel like you needed a little bit of a different direction, and it doesn't feel like Spectre doesn't feel like it's direct. I mean, Spectre does feel like a different movie from Skyfall. And even visually, like Roger Deakins didn't come back. It was, I want to say Hoyt. I can't remember his last name, but the guy who shot Interstellar, I believe, was the cinematographer for Spectre. So it even like looks different. And Skyfall has the benefit of having Roger Deakins' cinematography. Roger Deakins is like incredible. He shot Blade Runner 2049 and a million other movies. No Country for Old Men. One of my favorite cinematographers, if not my favorite cinematographer. The man creates a frame that is so gorgeous, and he's really embraced digital cameras, which is nuts that like you couldn't tell that his movies are shot on digital versus film. Like he creates such a beautiful image, and I from a cinematography standpoint, as somebody who is going to be the director of photography for my brother's upcoming Kamasato series, like I don't think I could ever get anywhere near the, like, you know, we all worship at the altar of Roger Deakins because that guy is just, he creates such beautiful imagery in his movies that he works on. But either way, Skyfall is just so well executed and is such a, like, it has plenty of fan pleasing moments on top of building upon the Bond mythology. And it kind of has this like, it's really good. And by the end of it, it feels like okay, he's Bond now. Like, as much as Casino Royale was like Bond Begins, by the end of Skyfall, it's like, okay, he is now classic James Bond. Everything is in place, and it gave me goosebumps. That last scene, the With Pleasure M, like that gives me goosebumps every single time. I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. I might be a little cold right now, though. The air conditioner just kicked on. But yes, that movie is just always is one of the tops as far as Bond goes. Casino Royale and Skyfall might be my two favorite Bond movies, and it's kind of crazy to think because I've had a lot of favorite Bond movies throughout the years. I really like Live and Let Die, and when it comes to Sean Connery, like From Russia with Love is really great. But either way, I think the Bonds that we're getting currently is just have been like really great for the most part. It's a little hit or miss. Spectre, I don't know what the fuck they were doing with some of that story. I wasn't really crazy about it. Some of it was unnecessary. Some of the other parts, like the twists and turns, were kind of dumb, in my opinion. So here's hoping they can kind of bring it full circle with the new Bond movie. I think it's like No Time to Die or something like that. So hopefully No Time to Die is good. It's being directed by Cary Fukunaga, the guy who was actually supposed to direct It Chapter 1 way back in the day. I don't know if it was meant to be split into two or if they were what exactly they were. Well, I think it was because they largely used Cary's script for the when Andy Muschietti came in to direct. So I'm talking about the recent It movies. It Chapter 2 just came out recently. Liz and I went and saw that. It was good. I want to see it again. See if I can kind of like solidify my opinion on it. But either way, I thought that Spectre was a little meh. I'm excited for the No Time to Die. Here's hoping it's a good capper for Daniel Craig as Bond. That man wants out. And I understand it. If you're that old and you're having to get into shape, and he goes hard, like he goes super hard when he's in Bond shape. That guy gets ripped. So here's hoping that's a good send off. And yeah, I definitely think when it comes down to it that Daniel Craig is my definitive Bond. Because he's just killed it. He's done so great. And he had to overcome so much. I remember following, like, at the time when they were doing Casino Royale, like, there was a website called craignotbond.com, and they just chronicled everything that went wrong with the filming or whatever. Apparently, he got his tooth knocked out when they were filming, like, during one of the scenes. Like, he got punched by a stunt performer. He had to learn how to drive a stick. And they were making fun of him for that on the website. Like, they were making fun of everything every little gaffe that happened while they were filming Casino Royale. They shat all over him. And then Casino Royale came out and everybody just shut the fuck up. So it's really cool seeing that man kind of overcome the adversity of nobody wanting him to be Bond. Not nobody, but like a lot of people not believing that he could do it. And then he killed it. So I think that happens with a lot of the time nowadays. You know, you get stuff like Heath Ledger being the Joker. You get Michael Keaton being cast as Batman. You don't know until it comes out if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad or if it's going to be great. So you got to kind of wait and just trust that the people who are working on the thing know what they're doing. And they don't always. So sometimes it's a bit of an experiment. You don't know if something's really going to come around. So who the hell knows? Here's hoping that the last Bond movie he does is good. All right, last question from Guttural. Most/least favorite movie of the year so far? I feel like, I've seen a good chunk of the movies that have come out. I've seen all the movies that I've been interested in going to see in the theater. I just don't feel like, for some reason, I don't feel like I've seen a whole bunch of movies. Although I definitely have. John Wick came out this year, right? John Wick Chapter 3. I think that might be one of my tops. I know a lot of people like really, really, really like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I did not like it. I liked it a lot, but I don't feel like I didn't leave that movie feeling like super satisfied like I have had with Tarantino movies in the past. I guess I felt better than when I left the theater for Hateful Eight. I didn't leave the theater for that. I watched that at home, but I wasn't crazy about Hateful Eight. I've since revisited it. I've talked about it on the podcast in the past about how I needed to revisit it. I watched the extended edition on Netflix that kind of turns it into like a little mini series. It's 4 episodes and I watched it all. I definitely liked it way better second time around, and being able to tackle it one episode at a time and not all necessarily the same night made it a little bit better too. So I definitely appreciate Hateful Eight way more with the extended edition. Supposedly they're turning Once Upon a Time into Hollywood into they're talking about it. Apparently Tarantino's thinking about it. Brad Pitt was talking about it recently, saying that's a high probability that they're going to take stuff they cut out of the movie and turn it into like an extended miniseries, just like they did with Hateful Eight. So I really liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I didn't like every single second of it. Like, I mean, there's some stuff that was in there that was like kind of a little, I don't know. I enjoyed the time that we spent with the characters, and I liked it. I did like it a lot. I feel like I'm coming off like I didn't like it. I liked it a lot, but I don't know if I would say it's my like favorite movie of the year. But then again, what else have I seen this year? I'm looking at my Letterboxd right now. I got John Wick Chapter 3, Detective Pikachu. I think that was this year. Avengers was great. Avengers was really, really good. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Aladdin, Godzilla, Toy Story, Midsummer, Spider-Man, Annabelle, Lion King, Ready or Not, It Chapter 2, Stuber, Captain Marvel. What movies? I mean, Endgame is probably really high up there, but that's like a movie that's working on being the end of like a series of movies. I almost feel like it's like, and it feels like a part 2, you know, of Infinity War and all that stuff, but it does feel separate. But it is like a part 1, part 2 sort of deal. So it's weird for me to say like that's my favorite, but at the same time, I kind of want to say Avengers Endgame is probably the top for me. Like that's the movie I saw the most in theaters this year. I saw it 3 times, IMAX twice at the AMC using my AMC A-list thing. And then I saw it at the TLC Chinese Theater in LA with Spoon and Z and Galm. And it was the week after. It was the same week. I saw it 3 times in IMAX opening week because I loved it. I loved every second of it. Because I'm somebody who's like, it's kind of a bit of a dour movie, especially early on. Like it's the result of the end of Endgame, or Infinity War, I should say. That kind of leaves you on that downer ending. And then you're kind of sitting in that downerness for a little bit. And it's kind of like, it's not the most uplifting movie for a good bit, but they're trying to solve, you know, everything with it and kind of fix everything that had happened. So I like a good dark movie, and, you know, that's one of the reasons why I like the DC movies so much. It's not the main reason. It's not that a DC movie can't be fun, a la Shazam. I thought Shazam was pretty fun. But I tend to like movies that are a little bit more of downer movies. Like if it's good, if it's engaging and all that stuff, it doesn't need to be, you know, ho-hum the entire time. And it gets dark in Endgame. And I appreciate that. Like, it's the darkest of the DC movies. It's the darkest of the Marvel movies for sure, by my book. And I appreciated that. So I would probably have to say Endgame's probably my at the top. Probably the top 2, top 3 for sure, if not the top movie. Movie I didn't like the most so far this year. There wasn't anything I left the movie thinking, ugh. I mean, maybe Midsummer. I went and saw Midsummer. Not that it was bad, though. It wasn't bad. It was not bad. But it was a little straightforward with kind of how it was going. They kind of made it seem like it was a bit of a mystery, but it really wasn't. There wasn't much mystery to it. It was just like, oh, what the fuck is what? There's a lot of that in that movie. But it kind of... It didn't follow through. Now, this is Ari Aster, the guy who made Hereditary, which I loved Hereditary. This is his follow-up from that. It's his second movie, Midsummer. It's about a woman who suffers a very personal tragedy and then goes on a vacation to Sweden with her boyfriend and some of his college friends who... one of his college friends is Swedish, and he's bringing them to Sweden to experience this midsummer event that the small community that he comes from celebrates. And it's kind of like one of the a couple of the students are like for their anthropology class, they're going to kind of observe and take in this like kind of ancient ritual that these people all kind of partake in and all that stuff. It's kind of like this summer event that happens every single year during summer. It's midsummer, everybody. Midsommar. But in things get kind of go from there, and things get really weird. It's definitely it gets out there for sure. It gets a little crazy. I wouldn't say I disliked it though. I just really feel like some of the like early on in that movie, I'm like, oh, okay. Like Hereditary has a little bit of like a string of depression through it, and I feel like early on in Midsommar, the movie kind of hits that same feeling, but then doesn't really ride it very well like Hereditary did. Like Hereditary rides it and kind of ramps up the horror and the tension, and it really kind of gets crazy towards the end. Not that it's like a super hardcore horror movie, but it gets dark, and it gets like the tension keeps building and building and building towards the end of that movie. In Midsommar, it kind of like early on, there's this thing that happens that I was like, oh shit. And I was really engaged at that point, but it kind of slowly loses me as time goes on. It's more so of like, what the fuck's going to happen next here? Like, I feel like I know what's going to happen, and ultimately it kind of does play out the way you would think it would, in a way. But it gets kind of weird, and it got kind of weak towards the end for me. I know they put out like a half-hour longer director's cut, and I don't even know how long Midsommar is. It was something like 2 hours already. So I couldn't even imagine a extended version of that. I don't know. It had some elements that I really liked in it, but it was kind of disappointed me by the end of it, I feel. When I left the theater, it was weird how many people were in the theater. Not that it was weird how many people were in the theater, but that's not the kind of movie that I like. Usually Liz and I watch these kind of movies that are kind of like the way this one goes at home. Like it reminded me of like an old 70s horror movie or something like that, where things just kind of get at, like there's a movie called Sentinel way back in the day that her and I watched. I was like, this reminds me of a movie we would have watched at home, like the Sentinel movie. Like that movie, it was like a 70s horror movie sort of deal. And it has like just things in there that's kind of awkward to see in a theater, not full of people. There's maybe at 10 plus other people in the theater with us. And it was just kind of like, there's some awkward things in the theater to see with this movie. But overall, I didn't think it was terrible, but I thought it was kind of, I don't know. It was fun discussing afterwards. Like, I think a movie that you kind of talk and can have a good conversation afterwards with, like, those are the kind of the best movies, even if you didn't like it. I think any kind of movie that can spur a discussion and actually kind of make it better through talking about it more with other people, that's always fun. I like doing that when you can discuss themes or specific instances and be like, oh, you remember that? And like, oh, I think this meant that. And like, oh, okay, I can see this kind of story thread going on, and you can kind of break down a movie a little bit more. I think that's really cool when you could do that. So overall, of the movies I've seen so far this year, probably, well, yeah, if you say least favorite, I would say my least favorite. I saw Toy Story. I loved it. Godzilla wasn't amazing, but like I enjoyed the monster fights and that and stuff. So, oh man, that'd be a Godzilla King of the Monsters and Midsommar double feature. There you go. Somebody do it and let me know how it goes. Don't do it. But okay. Well, everybody, that's all the questions I got for the movie Q&A this time around. Be sure to keep an eye out on the Patreon in the future whenever I do kind of call outs for questions for Q&As and stuff. If you're interested in submitting questions, let me know what you thought about the podcast in the comments below on this post. And I will see you all on the next thing that I do, or you'll hear me, or I'll hear you, or I'll see you, or I'll be in your bedroom under the bed. Be sure to check under the bed for old Dan. If you hear that laugh in the middle of the night, you'll know it's me. I don't know what's happening. So long, everybody. Bye.